My name is TimTim, and I am a 3D artist. Most of my slides are white, so if you have sunnies on, maybe put them on. I create all of my work under the name TimTim. 95% of people think that I am a man called Tim, which is fair enough. But it's a name that is very close to my heart. My granddad used to call me TimTim, so I keep it despite the constant confusion. I will show you my show reel from 2024, and will explain after why I'm showing you something that is 2 years old. This is just so you can get a sense of the type of work that I do, or more accurately, that I used to do, and I will get to that as well. Right. This is the timeline of my career so far. Pretty straightforward. I started as a graphic designer, did that for quite a long time, until I picked up 3D in 2022, and very rapidly transitioned to a freelance career path as a 3D artist. There was a bit of an overlap there, where I kind of did both at the same time until I fully transitioned to freelance. At the end of 2025, I stopped all work to go and become a mom, hence the 2024 show reel. So I am slowly coming out of maternity leave now, and I will be resuming my freelance career. As you can see, my 3D artist journey is a fairly recent affair. I've only been doing it commercially for 2 years. But in that short amount of time, I have been extremely fortunate to be working with some really nice people on some really cool and fun projects. I worked with Pepsi to create a collection of NFTs back in the day where NFTs were still relevant. I created the cover for the Stylist magazine. I worked with Hoka on the launch campaign for their first kids' shoes, and I created a series of animations for that. I created the main graphics for Young Arrows, which is an award ceremony by British Arrows celebrating emerging talent in the moving image and advertising industry. I also collaborated with Coach to produce a series of in-store videos for the launch of the quilted tabby bag collection. And these are just some of the highlights of my 2 years of freelancing so far. And even though I have loads of projects that I'm so incredibly proud of, and I could endlessly bang on about, I will not go into any of them beyond this point. Instead, I want to talk to you about creative fulfillment. For the better part of my creative career, this has actually been my main focus, and I finally reached a point where I can say that I am creatively happy and fulfilled. And I want to tell you how I got here, because I started at the very opposite extreme. To understand my journey, we need to go back to my junior designer years. I got my first job working in a fast-paced, high-pressure kind of agency. And to summarize my junior years, they were a very long internal scream. I didn't really have a good time. At the time, my inexperience wasn't gelling too well with my perfectionism and my wanting to get everything right the first time. So I was constantly spiraling and drowning in a pool of self-doubt, constant anxiety about small decisions, and just generally feeling like I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. But the interesting thing to me was that even though I felt like that, I wasn't terrible at my job. The clients were happy, I got good, sometimes great internal feedback. So my ability to do the work itself wasn't really the issue. It was just my own reaction to it, and my insecurities about the process and what I needed to do. And that just made me incredibly, incredibly bitter. I didn't enjoy any project I worked on, no matter how good the results were, no matter how good the feedback was, no matter how happy the client was. Nothing was ever good enough. And I was in my early 20s at this point, and I thought to myself that I was far too young to be that bitter. The devastating thing for me was that I got onto this career path because I truly enjoyed making things and solving problems and being creative. And somehow I managed to lose all that magic in the first 2 years of working. So I promised myself that I will find a way to get happy, and if I couldn't, then it was time to call it quits and leave the creative industry and just find a new path. And this is really where my pursuit for creative fulfillment started. I had to get extremely low to realize that I needed to make some changes. And the first thing that I did, I dropped a day in work to go and see if I could get that magic back. Before I started work, I always had creative hobbies, which I really enjoyed and which I very quickly abandoned when I became a junior. So I thought I'd go back to them and pick them up again and see if anything happens. I picked up the hobbies that I left behind. One of them was visual coding or generative design, which was essentially creating images and animations through code and small interactions. And this was before AI was a thing. I actually had to code every line. I also did a bit of creative tech. I used to play with this all the time with LEDs and circuits and microcontrollers. So I started doing this again, which was really good fun. I picked up some new hobbies. I learned how to make furniture out of different materials. I discovered that you can cut very intricate illustrations with a vinyl cutter, and I became obsessed with this. And I did loads of them. And a bunch of other visual, stylistic, conceptual experiments. But overall, after a year of this, I was starting to see some real results. I felt happier outside of work. The creative hobbies I had made me feel more fulfilled and more level-headed. I didn't feel that self-inflicted stress and pressure in work as deeply as I did before. And overall, I was happier. I wasn't really thinking of quitting anymore. And funnily enough, it almost didn't matter at this point how happy or unhappy I was in work. The creative side quests brought a significant amount of balance in my life because I had another creative outlet to look forward to, and that compensated for any minor or major frustrations in work. Long story short, pandemic happened. I got furloughed. I picked up some freelance jobs, still as a graphic designer. I got my first taste of how it feels to stand on my own 2 feet creatively. And eventually I got a job in a different agency, still as a graphic designer. Lovely team, great projects and clients. By this point, experience was kicking in. I had the process figured out, so I wasn't fumbling in the dark anymore, not as much anyway. I was more confident, and overall I enjoyed my job, and I was really happy to push forward in the direction of graphic design. The only thing that I wanted was to continue with my creative experiments. So I dropped a day in work again just to go and do a bunch of random creative things for my own heart and nothing else. And that is how I picked up 3D. I was always mesmerized by 3D artists and their work, and I never really got into it to understand how it was made. And I wanted to see if I could do it myself. So I picked it up with the intent of just playing with it outside of work and just creating something. And 4 years ago, almost to the date, I created my first ever render. And I absolutely loved it. The complexity of the software, the infinite possibilities, it was like a massive playground for me with lots of interesting challenges and problems to solve. I loved it so much that I started doing it a bit obsessively. Before work, after work, on my Fridays off, at the weekends, I opened the software almost every single day. And after a while, a certain style started to emerge. But the pivotal moment was when I discovered that you can inflate things in Cinema 4D. I loved it so much. It was so incredibly entertaining and fun for me to play with this, to just create different compositions and see what I can inflate and how I can make things move. This was the pivotal moment that created the domino effect that would essentially launch my 3D artist career. And this is one of the first animations that I've ever made. After this point, everything was puffy and squishy. And all of this was happening before the inflated style became a trend. So by the time that happened, I already had a massive portfolio of puff and squish. So I started getting a lot of inquiries for freelance work. And this is really how I transitioned to a freelance career path. I started getting enough inquiries to create this type of work that I felt comfortable to transition from graphic design and just do this full time. And I explored this style in all its forms. This turned into 2 years of puff and squish. This is my Instagram feed. I post pretty much everything that I create, and I use it as a visual journal. And I am very proud of what I managed to achieve in this time. And more importantly, how much I enjoyed every single piece that I created for myself or for the clients that I worked with. But as much as I welcome a bit of randomness in my work, there is a method behind everything that I do and behind how I now guide my freelance career and my creative choices. I call it the feel-good way. And I'm pretty sure it's going to sound very familiar to you, so I'm not expecting to tell you anything new or revolutionary. But in the midst of deadlines and stress and pressure, this is just a gentle reminder to go and create something that feels good to you. And it all starts here. The creative is a feely creature. As much as we rationalize our creative decisions, we tend to lead with instinct and emotion. And that's why we say things like, this doesn't feel right, and it's not quite there yet, and this feels better. I do believe that we all have this internal guide for making creative decisions, and over time we just learn how to articulate and rationalize what is essentially instinct. The feel-good way relies on this. But the first step is shifting the focus to process. We usually use our spidey senses on finding the right outcome and only consider process to the extent of efficiency and optimization, what is the fastest route to this outcome. But we always tend to place the joy of the process on the back seat. The feel-good way starts by focusing on how the act of doing feels. The outcome is not even relevant at this point. And if you are starting something new, the outcome will most likely be a bit crap, because we all need a bit of time for skills and experience to grow. So with process in mind, go wide. Let your curiosity guide you and go and try a bunch of different things and see what happens. This one is very important. We figure things out by doing, not by thinking about doing, because sometimes we like the idea of something more than actually doing it. I planned whole projects in my head that I was mega excited about, only to realize that I found them incredibly tedious to work on. So prioritize action over planning or thinking too much about things. And as you move through your creative experiments, pay attention. What feels energizing? What are the things that you can't pull away from? The problems that you can't help but solve? What does not require force? And this is not about doing the easy thing. Do extremely difficult things, but can you spring out of bed in the morning to get to it? Or are you procrastinating until your own internal guilt forces you into taking action? This is the key thing when trying to do anything. Find the right challenges for yourself, because we are all built different. What is draining and stressful to me might be energizing and exciting to you, and vice versa. It can take a few months of learning, failure, and experimentation to find what is truly yours. But you know you've hit the jackpot when whatever you are playing with is something that you can do when time and energy are limited. I know how it feels to not have time and to be exhausted, but I also came to realize that if you find the right type of work to focus on, it can feel like a breath of fresh air to be able to do it. I was absolutely shattered here, but I had a sleeping baby on my chest, and I was playing with some things that I found really interesting. So my exhaustion didn't feel that heavy. I was really happy to be able to do this. It was the sort of thing where I wasn't really thinking, oh, the baby's sleeping, I should open the laptop and do something. It was, oh, I have half an hour to myself. I get to open the laptop and do something. On a more granular level, pay attention to what you're doing specifically. There will be moments in the process that feel good and moments that feel extremely frustrating. For me, when it came to 3D, when I was in the beginning, I really enjoyed working on the composition and figuring out the intricacies of the software. But by the time I got to the stylistic part of things, so colors, materials, mood, my focus was starting to fade. So I fixed this by setting some stylistic boundaries, and this helped me push forward with more momentum. I created the color palette for myself, so I didn't have to make these decisions again and again. And this brought a lot of consistency to my work because after this point, everything was now connected by color. I allowed myself a lot of flexibility, a wide color palette that can be used fully or minimally. And then I did exactly the same thing for materials. I wasn't really interested in exploring that side of the software yet, so I just chose 3 materials that I really liked, and I used them again and again. And same for the lights. All my work for the past 2 years has pretty much used the same light rig. But these stylistic boundaries allowed me to take some of the creative decisions out of the process, and this lightened everything and allowed me to focus on the things that I truly enjoyed. So my process tipped in the favor of the feel-good, energizing moments. Once you hit this, you know you are onto a winner because it means that it's something that you can do again and again without needing much motivation, without needing to talk yourself into doing it. You just do it because you enjoy it that much. So the feel-good way starts with searching. You might need to do this for a few months, but eventually something will truly click. And when that happens, you take it and you explore it. And this is when your focus shifts. Because up until this point, the focus was on finding that feel-good process. But once you find it, you can finally look at the outcome. And now it's all about the outcome and finding the outcome that pleases you. So you have the 2 parts of the whole. So whatever truly clicked for you, take it and turn it on all sides, explore it, and run with it until your enthusiasm and energy for it start to fade. And this is where the biggest trap happens. Because enthusiasm is not linear. It eventually moves on a slightly downward path. But it's very relative. For some things, it can take days. For some things, it can take months, years, or decades. But the trap here is that once you exert any effort in a direction, you feel you still need to move forward with that, even though your enthusiasm peaked and is now moving on a slightly downward path. And the more you stay on this downward path, the more the challenges you face become draining, and the thing that you once loved becomes a chore. When this happens, this is when you need to either move on or make some changes to see if you can get that excitement back up. For me, this is what happened with Puff and Squish. My enthusiasm started to dip a bit after 2 years of doing it. And even though I still feel good about it and I still do it from time to time, I feel like I need something more, something else to focus on as well. So I decided to go back to the searching phase. This happened at the same time I was getting ready to go on maternity leave. I thought that the career break that maternity leave will give me might be a good time to figure something else out. I stopped all client work at this point, so without the pressure to find something that is also commercially viable, I had more room to play and explore freely. Obviously, to the extent of time and energy because I wasn't exactly going on holiday. This is where I metaphorically drew a line in the sand and announced that I am moving forward and searching for a different path. And it was very hard, to be honest, because I decided to move forward from something that I was comfortable with in favor of pursuing the unknown, which is always a bit scary no matter how many times you go through it. I didn't want to move away from 3D, but I needed to change things up a bit. Either add something to how I do things or just find a new stylistic path or just try to see what can bring my enthusiasm back up. I started looking in the things or in the places that I didn't fully explore before. Started looking at materials, different textures, different shapes, different color palettes, different formats, changing up my workflow, introducing some 2D to 3D workflow, looking at different moods and visual styles, finally started looking at different light rigs. And eventually I landed on this, and this is not about the shapes, this is about the colors. I was playing with colors and it just felt great to me. I could do this endlessly. I ended up spending about a month just finding random gradients and playing with them. And I carried on not fully knowing where this was going, but I enjoyed finding these gradients and I really wanted to explore them further, put them in different contexts and see where and how I can use them. I ended up turning this into a digital pack, more just as an exercise to see what it takes to build and release a digital product. But in the meantime, I took these gradients and I did my own version of deep dive. I just started creating different compositions and stress testing these gradients to see if I enjoyed the outcome. I looked at typography and animation. I went back to Puff and Squish to see if my excitement would go back up a bit with this newfound stylistic path. I tried different styles and different moves that were quite opposite to what I was doing so far. Abstract backgrounds, different types of animations, compositions that felt more graphical, again, a bit more type, different moods, found motion blur. But the whole thing with this is you have to lean into uncertainty. I keep saying that I don't know where this whole thing with the gradients was going, but this is by design. For the feel-good way process to work, you can only decide on the starting point, not the end point. To get anywhere good, you need to let the path in front of you get revealed organically, not try to force it to go in a very specific direction. And this is where curiosity and instinct lead the way. This is a matter for the heart, not the brain. This is where you go with your spidey senses and you go, this feels good and this doesn't feel good. You need to lean heavily on uncertainty here. Trust the process phrase is essentially this. And this is the case for personal work, but also for client work. You always need to embrace a bit of uncertainty to get anywhere good. And when I was a junior, I used to hate this. I hated it so much because uncertainty was the enemy for me. The not knowing was the root cause of all my stress. But through my creative experiments, I learned to love it because it always led me to unexpected places that I couldn't have planned for. So I learned how to be comfortable with uncertainty and how to trust it. When it came to the gradients, the path in front of me was getting revealed in slightly unusual ways. I mentioned before that I decided to turn this pack of 15 gradients into a digital pack. And I was working on the landing page for it. And this is the first time that I put these gradients together. Because initially when I created them, I kind of worked with them in isolation, one at a time. And when I put them together, something clicked in my head, because I think it's a great mix of complementing and jarring colors that just somehow work together. And I do know that some of you, or maybe most of you, might not agree with me, and this is really burning your retinas. But for me, this is eye candy. The moment that I put them together, something really sparked in me. And I think it's a bit of serendipity at play, because if I set out to create 15 gradients that can be used together, I think I would have probably got there, but I would have hated the process because this is about 50 colors on the page. And to find 50 colors that somehow work together would have been such an incredibly tedious task. So, happy accidents do happen. I liked it so much that I dramatically pivoted in that direction. Again, this is my Instagram feed, and where you see that green square is where I announced this puffy gradient kit, and you can see that everything that followed after that was just these gradients. And I did the same, my own version of the deep dive. Take the colors, put them together in different contexts, see how they feel, see if this is something that sparks joy. I made this for Black Friday, by the way. And yeah, same again, exploring different moods and different styles. Again, I started to love motion blur, by the way. Also, going back to past ideas. A couple of years ago, I created this, where I combined 2D and 3D materials, and I thought it was a really interesting effect. So I decided to try that on the gradients. And when I created this sort of like 2D to 3D composition, or 3D to 2D, however you want to feel it, however you want to see it, was really interesting to me. It was another thing that clicked in my head. So then I went again, take it, explore it, turn it on all sides, and see what happens. And this feels like a broader and more coherent direction for me now, and I'm super excited about it. This mix of 2D and 3D feels like home. And this is the feeling where I was hoping to get to when I decided to move away from puff and squish. And this is where I am in terms of my own stylistic pivoting, and I am very excited about the path in front of me. But this is where I'm starting to consider the commercial viability of what I'm doing. Because up until now, when you go through experiments like this, they do happen in a bit of a vacuum. I set the rules, I decide what the consequences are. You know, the real world doesn't really work like that. But putting this out in the world makes it easier to figure out if it has any value to others as well. And I'm already getting some interested inquiries and responses to this. But whether this can turn into a full-time freelance job remains to be seen. It's only in its infancy. I've only been doing this for a couple of months now. So yeah, we'll see where all of this goes. If not, I will knock on all your doors for a job later this year. But going back to the feel-good way, there is another component to this, and it is vital. Don't build in isolation. Tell people about it. I know it's hard putting yourself out there, but I do think it's part of the experience, and it can be wonderful. I do believe that the creative experiments, whether you want to do things commercially or they're just for your own heart, they become more fun when you share them with others. And this is coming from a very introverted and very socially awkward person. Show your work to other people. That's how good things happen, through conversations, collaborations, and unexpected encounters, and also feedback from the outside world. And I do believe that the creative community as a whole is very supportive. We all tend to applaud each other when we see that there is intention and effort and growth. And we embrace it with all its imperfections, because we all go through it no matter how far along we are in our careers. So, as I said, it's nothing revolutionary, probably very familiar. I'm sure that all of you have your own version of the feel-good way. But the ultimate goal is to be yourself, to solve problems you can't help but solve, to study and learn what you can't pull yourself away from, and to eliminate any work that does not challenge you creatively. If you do these three things, you will soon realize how quickly you get lucky. The more you create, the more your skills and experience will grow, and the more you share with others, the more you expand your luck surface area. That's how opportunities come your way. That's how you create your own opportunities, and that is one way to become a happy and fulfilled creative. That was the feel-good way. Before I leave the stage, I will do a quick blast of short lessons and insights that I've come to discover over the past few years. In no particular order. Reduce your planning time frame. Long-term planning works for businesses and agencies and studios, but at an individual level, the famous where you see yourself in 5 years is quite flawed. You will not be the same person in 5 years. The person you will become will want something different that the person that you are today cannot even comprehend or anticipate. So pivot and adjust frequently as you change as a person. If you want ideas, remember to do nothing from time to time. We are glued to our phones and we are constantly bombarded with information. Remember to give your brain a bit of a break. It needs some space to breathe to be able to come up with ideas. Inspiration is fleeting. Make the most of it when you have it. Execute on ideas as quickly as you can because they tend to run away if you postpone for too long. Very important, you don't have to do this, you get to do this. It's a privilege to be tired by a challenge of your own choosing. And this is a very important mindset shift if you are struggling with what you're doing at the moment. If you don't love the process, you will endlessly chase happiness and fulfillment, and they will evade you. I know it sounds very dramatic, but I do fully believe it, and this is pretty much the backstory of this whole presentation, and it is my experience. And lastly, there is no end destination, just a long journey with a lot of stops. Once you achieve a goal or a milestone, you will just move on to the next. The destination is just an illusion, so make sure you enjoy the journey because that's what we all really have. Before I leave the stage, a few things I need to shout about. I will host a workshop at 4 p.m. It's on 3D type that moves. So if you want to come and create some fun typography in Cinema 4D, I will be in the workshop room. Maxon is giving away a 6-month license to Maxon 1. So if you want to scan the QR code to be in the chance to win, I'll leave this on the screen for a few seconds. Okay, I'll move on. Right. If my gradients didn't burn your retinas, you can have them in your home. I have a print shop. And I also do tutorials. I have a Patreon that is packed with all kinds of interesting tutorials and project files and digital goodies. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can find me there. Thank you very much for listening to me. And follow me to nowhere, because there is no destination.